Welcome to another episode of WNYA Athletics Inside High School Football Weekly with Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports. I'm Frank Wolf from WNYA Athletics. Dick, the first week is over. So, what did we learn?
I think we learned quite a lot, particularly when you take a look at some of the games. And Jamestown with Saban Van Sickle was going to be, very competitive throughout the year. And then he gets hurt in the first quarter. He's got 59 yards in the quarter, and he's done. But West Seneca East, when you take a look at Sean Dowlock, the line that they have, they're going to be a force. Hutch Tech's total domination over Williamsville South was somewhat of a surprise. And West Seneca West, when you look at the way they dominated Sweet Home, and you look at Liam Shore, which I hope that Mike is still going to keep him at quarterback because he is such a stud on both sides of the ball. But at quarterback, his size, his ability to run, his aggressive, he's physical, and he's fun to watch.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what West Seneca West does at the quarterback position. Obviously, they had the player come in from Sweet Home, who's an unbelievable athlete in his own right, and I'm sure there's going to be something there. Did he do enough to? I mean, they scored 48 points. I know they got some special teams helpers there, but at the same time, Shire looked pretty good with the ball. Tough to bring down, a pretty good runner, and he made all the throws.
Yeah, and he had 121 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, but they just dominated. And when you take a look at the number of quality players that are returning, and you put Liam at the quarterback position, and you bring in Robinson, you put him in the defensive backfield, that's just going to add to their game.
Sure, absolutely. They got a nice division matchup coming up against Kenmore West on Friday night. I don't know how many Blue Devils are going to do. Obviously, I went to Kenmore West, so I'm very worried about this particular matchup. Against West Seneca West. I don't know what Johnny Haynes is going to be able to do to slow them down. I didn't see Sweet Home too aggressive at the line of scrimmage. Getting their hands on those receivers coming out of their formation. I don't know if that's something you can do or if you can key on maybe one or two particular receivers, line up the box. They can beat you so many different ways. John Spire's a good runner. Brian Ball's a very good runner. And then do we even have to say how good Justin Johnson is? He's one of the top receivers in the area. And Hayek isn't too bad either. He's got some nice hands, a great defensive player. I believe he had 2 interceptions. So he had a well-rounded game. But I don't know how you're going to stop that West Seneca West offense. That wasn't a surprise, what we saw on Friday night out of them at all in the league. Not to me anyways, but I'll tell you, I watched the game film Saturday, and I was pretty impressed with that Sweet Home quarterback that came in. He looked tough to bring down. Very quick kid.
Jamal Lewis
looked very good. I think they've got a player in him. They just got to get some pieces around him and maybe a little more comfortable with the playbook. But I think Sweet Home will be okay. That division beat A2 that they're in. They struggled.
If you look at A2, they lost
every game.
6 games.
Yeah.
And when you start the first week of the season, you're losing 6 games. And you're going to get into some contention toward the end of the year. When you look at the playoffs, the way they do it, 3 first, 3 second, 2 third. A3 is very powerful. And one of those teams, and it could either be South, West Seneca East, Star Point, and South Park, which I don't think will be the first 2, maybe even East, are not going to be able to make the playoffs because the team from a league that is not as competitive is going to be able to get the wins in the record.
And we talked about how tough A3 was last week. A2 comes out after week 1, 0-6. But Sweet Home and North Tonawanda play this week. North Tonawanda really had a rough time Saturday against that Niagara Wheatfield team. Jordan Parks probably had one of the most amazing performances of all the quarterbacks this weekend, and there were a lot of great performances between Lackawanna, Star Point, and then Niagara Wheatfield on Saturday and Cole Snyder had a heck of a game on Friday night with 5 touchdowns against Franklinville, Ellicottville. But really, Jordan Parks did a phenomenal job. So they look like the real deal, the Falcons this year.
That was one of my sleepers. I think that when you take a look at Jordan and you take a look at what they did last year, the number of kids that returned, the quality of their depth, that they could very easily be one of the first 2 teams in that division, particularly with West and Wheatfield. But it's 1 week's in, We got a lot of games to be played.
Sure, but that's kind of been one of the things that's kept Niagara Wheatfield down a little bit is the way they've started their seasons. But now they're 1-0, and they have a home game coming up again against Frontier, who didn't look great this past Friday against Lackawanna. So the Niagara Wheatfield Falcons are looking pretty good to go into Week 3 at 2-0, and that's going to just help the confidence in that locker room, and it buys them some time. And we'll have to see how the season goes on, but Coach Nixon has got his hands on some pretty good players right now.
And Preston Dolan, who kicked the field goal, 42 yards, which was the number for the player that had passed. That just when you look at it, everything they've gone through, they're not gonna let up the whole season.
No, they're not. I was surprised. People said I was nuts for even thinking Bennett could play with St. Joe's, but St. Joe's rolled Bennett. There's no other way to put it. Bennett didn't show up for that game, if you ask me. I expected Bennett to come out and play a much better game. I thought they had all the players in the right positions, but for some reason, one reason or another, St. Joe's had a field day with them, and the game was over quickly.
When you look at the line that St. Joe's has in Doty and Cole and McDougal, I think no one can match them in Western New York, if not in New York State.
Yeah.
And then if you took a look at Micah Brown and how well he did in his first game, only a junior, and a lot of the attention was Casey Kelly had left. And by the way, Casey led his team to victory in Week 1 down in North Carolina. He scored a touchdown, pass for a touchdown. But, when you take a look at it, they've got the horses, and even with losing Kelly and Lofton, they're going to be a force for the whole rest of the year.
A couple other players that really stood out, that kid Quantavious Cleckley of Dunkirk. They had a pretty easy game on Friday, fair to say. They have another easy one coming up against Tonawanda. So I don't know how good that player is just yet, but he really started off the year with a bang. Dunkirk with a big win, Burgard with a win, Fredonia with a win, Maryville dominating Cleve Hill. I didn't see that coming, Dick. How about you?
Well, if they've got Aaron at quarterback, when you look at defensively, it was Diem, it was Whaler, and it was Thomas that all had double-digit tackles. But when you take a look at Maryville, what they've been able to achieve in the last couple of years, how many seniors they have on that team, and losing by a point in overtime, that's in their memory bank, and they're going to be a tough out for anyone.
I agree. So just talking out loud here, starting with AA, Lancaster, Will North had pretty easy games on Friday night by their standards. They rolled their opponents. It's quite interesting, though, that the first offensive play for Lockport, they go 90-plus yards, scoring the first on their opening play against Lancaster, a defense that really didn't give up a touchdown until the Orchard Park game last year. So, but that kind of, I think, grounded them real quick. Lancaster, they scored the next 50-some-odd points.
Well, when you take a look at, they have, I think, 47 on the roster. You've got a lot of quality players. So JV has dominated in the last few years, so it just wasn't the varsity. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because if you look at 6 teams in that AA, particularly 5, with Hutch Tech and Waynesville North, Orchard Park, Clarence, Lancaster, every game's going to count. Every game they've got to be able to play. And when I watched Clarence and Kenmore West this past weekend, one of the things I noticed was Clarence was getting a lot of penalties. They can't do that against any one of those teams.
Do you put that on inexperience? Because there's a lot of kids on that Clarence team, especially on the line, that were sophomores last year that might not have got enough playing time, playing behind a pretty good line that they had last year. They had some injuries. This year, really getting their first varsity experience. I don't know if that came into play at all.
I'm old school. A penalty is a penalty. The only reason you do that is you're not focused and not listening to your coaches, etc. And The other thing was when you took a look at it, I think it was 90 degrees or 85 degrees, and playing that in that weather. And I know that Paul Bergio substituted an awful lot of those players. So it remains to see, but they've got this big game coming up
Yeah,
in hosting Williamsville North, and that's
yeah.
one of the big games this week.
Is that a game you think you might find yourself at?
Well, the nice thing about it is that it's televised by Spectrum, so depending on the weather, it does make a difference. But that's where I'm going to be, even if it's for only a half before I go and watch the other, because I wanted to see Williamsville North's line and how that matches up and what it can do with Clarence.
Well, I happened to be at the Will North Will East game Friday night, and the offensive line is stout, very physical. I mean, they controlled the line of scrimmage against the crosstown rivals, Williamsville East, but that is a Class A team. I think North will have a much better test up front with Clarence,
Yep.
but they do have they've got some runners. Their two running backs, Bass, and the other guy's names are escaping me. The other running back for Williamsville North. Tough runners, north-south, very athletic, very big, and they'll run you over. They can run through you as opposed to having to run around you. They had no trouble finding the end zone Friday night. Dylan Kelly had a great game. Both sides of the ball, came up with a big interception, killed a Willie's drive. They really only had two drives that made it across midfield, and both ended in interceptions.
And Dylan is, an all-Western New York candidate, outstanding. He'll be playing for some college in Division One and Division Two. I think he's now 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah.
Benches almost 300 pounds. He's got a good GPA, and he's got the Kelly gene, which doesn't hurt.
No, and Newsall looked pretty good too. He accounted for four of the
Yeah.
touchdowns, 3 through the air, and then he rushed for one. Looked really good. Hutch Tech, as you mentioned, they came together nicely to play Will South. They looked really good on Friday night. They've got a big matchup coming up this weekend that we'll talk about a little bit more later. Getting into the A's, West Seneca West obviously rolled. Star Point, Niagara Wheatfield, we mentioned those teams. West Seneca East, we don't have the latest on Savon Van Sickle yet and that injury and how that's going to play out for the rest of the season. But we expected Jamestown to be a factor, but I don't know how good they are going to be without Savon Van Sickle.
Francisco Rodriguez, also an outstanding player. He's been 3 years starter for the Red Raiders, and he only had 40, 50 yards. You take a look at what Van Sickle, would have done in that game. You don't know how much closer it would have been.
I believe he only touched the ball 3 times and he had almost 60 yards.
Yep.
So that tells you a lot right there. They have a nice quarterback that came back, Drew Boggs,
Right.
who can air it out. But West Seneca East, they did a number on the Red Raiders at Strider Field in opening week 1. They've got a big game coming up against Will South. So we'll see how West Seneca East continues to play this year.
Well, West Seneca East has all their offensive, both on both sides of the ball, their lines back. And Nick Hammond is a stud on both sides of the ball. He's the catalyst for them. And when you take a look at one of the problems Jamestown's had in recent years, they haven't had those 4 linemen that dominated on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
They don't have it this year either.
And I will always say that the game is won in the trenches. You buy your offense, you buy your quarterback some time, you open up some holes for your running backs, and you keep the other team in check. You shut down their offensive, their runners, and you plug the holes, this, that, and the other. West Seneca East is a team that I think a lot of people might not have been high on this year with the loss of the Marino twins. But Jolak's a heck of a player, and with the lines coming back stronger than ever, they still have one of the best coaches around in Coach Marino. So West Seneca East might have surprised a few, but I know they didn't get anything past you. So you've been cheering them on quite a bit. Orchard Park, McKinley. That game looked like it was going to be a little bit closer at times. I know Orchard Park, Craig Dana, brand new coach, got his first win, along with Coach Terlizio of Hutch Tech. But Orchard Park at McKinley was a pretty interesting game. Probably the best player in the field was Tavon Martin from McKinley. He had a hell of a game for them. And at one point, Orchard Park looked like they were rolling. He returns a 80, 90-yard interception pick 6. They go into the half, and they come out, and I believe the next kickoff he brought back 50 yards to give him good field position.
Well, it's interesting because he was at McKinley, went to Sweet Home his junior year, and now he's back at McKinley. And then when you have Kyer Fields and you get some other talent on that team, they're going to be a force. So right now, when you take a look at those 6 teams, pretty much that's open.
Yeah, McKinley's in the mix. After what I
Yeah.
saw, I strongly believe that they are in the mix in Class A. Moving on to Bs. Anybody out there other than Maryvale and Cheektowaga, who both had great opening weekends? Anybody else in B that really? I mean, Albion won 34 nothing, I believe, or something
I think
ridiculous.
Lackawanna and Albion, when you take a look at those 2 teams that are meeting this week in a game that could really have tremendous implications related to the playoff seeding and that. When you take a look at that Jeremiah Cavanis, the quarterback, he's a senior.
Yeah.
And, the Smith brothers really dominated as far as carrying the ball, throwing the ball in the last few years. But this kid's special. Then if you look at Manny Land and if you look at some of the other players, they're going to be competitive. Albion, to me, right now, with this team, is back to where the Domenico days when they won all the time. They don't have a weakness. You take Eugene Robinson, you take Bryce Pritchard, you take, I think it's Ken Restivo, lineman. They're going to be a force, so it'll be very interesting to see what transpires when the Purple Eagles.
They're not flashy. They're not flashy at all. They're just They're just a tough team.
But the physicality that they have, they play smash mouth football.
Yes.
And Lackawanna plays smash mouth football.
Yes.
So if you're going to that game, it's not going to be you're getting some cupcakes as far as tackles. No. You're going to get the noise.
Well, we're definitely going to be talking about that one. I believe that's a 7 p.m. start out in Albion. Couple other teams in B catch your eye. Iroquois had a win, but Newport hung in there with them. That Joe Powers, man, oh man, what a beast!
Yeah, and Iroquois had a tough scrimmage with Orchard Park, so it'll be interesting. I think Pioneer and Iroquois play this week, and Pioneer had a good game. They had a shutout. Riegerman did everything except get popcorn out at halftime. He just is amazing. He kicks the ball. He's outstanding tackler, running back. They could put him at quarterback. So they'll be good. Iroquois, I think when you look at the B1, you got Cheektowaga, Maryville. Then you look and you got Pioneer. Where's Pioneer going to fit? And as far as if they finish third, are they going to be able to get in the playoffs?
They've got a tough road, no question about it. But I think this matchup with Iroquois is going to say a lot about that particular program.
Right. And it's at Iroquois.
And it is at Iroquois, yeah. So that's a game I wish Spectrum kind of was covered. I wish they had a little bit more out there because that's one that you can be at Will North and watch that on your phone maybe.
Every week we've got so many games that you want to be at, and you can only see a few. And years ago, one weekend, I saw 11 games, but they played Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for whatever reason. And, I saw half. I was at St. Joe's, and another half I went to Amherst. And it was like, after 11 games, I needed a rest. And it was like, I have never done that, never will do that again.
I did 4 games on a Friday night last year, and I still don't know how I did it. But they just happened to be all within close proximity. Grand Island, I think, Will North, Will East was the first game, and then I headed over to see Kenmore East and Amherst, or Will South, whoever they were playing, and went over to Grand Island, North Tonawanda, and I can't remember the 4th game I ended up at. But somewhere in the middle there, I had another game. But that's crazy because you just give you enough time to really enjoy the game because you don't want to be driving around all over Western New York at different games. Pick 1 or 2, maybe catch first half. In fact, I'll tell you in the third segment what I'm thinking of doing this weekend. That's got my buddies all questioning my sanity, which they usually do anyways. But we're going to come back in just a moment, and we're going to get into some of the players that really outperformed on the opening weekend of high school football. So let's head to a break and check in with some of our sponsors. Welcome back to WNYA Athletics High School Football Weekly with Frank Wolf and Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports. I want to say thank you to a couple of our sponsors today, Scory Financial out in West Seneca, Cipriano Realtors in Tonawanda, CSA Prep Star, the North End Grill, and the Paul Wolf Insurance Agency in Kenmore, New York. Thank you for your sponsoring this program today. Dick, there was a couple classes I left off in the last segment, Class C and then D, and of course Monsignor Martin. Real quick, in Class C, we had assumed that Southwestern was going to win, and they did. They looked very good. Wilson won. They beat that Silver Creek team. That was a game that was very touted as a pretty tough game for them, but they did okay there. Akron won. They beat JFK on Saturday. And then on any other teams stand out in C, North or South to you?
Well, JFK lost 23 seniors, so that was expected. And, when you look at it, Chautauqua Lake with Kurt Fisher stood out because he just added to his credibility.
Sure.
Now he's got 222 wins, and they are going to be a force in Class C South, and they play Southwestern in the 6th week of the season. And that'll be an interesting game to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. Down in D, Maple Grove and CSP both scored almost 100 points combined. No surprise there. We expected those teams to win, and they did.
Again, Maple Grove only has 21 players, which is surprising. Hendricks scored 3 touchdowns, and Carson Christ is the quarterback. They had Easton Tanner going from quarterback to running back, and they play this week. They take CSP, dominated Portville 46-zip, and that'll be an interesting matchup. And the craziness in Class D with only 4 teams, they play week 2. They also play week 6.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that game in that particular scenario, Maple Grove and CSP, in our third segment. Monsignor Martin, we already talked about St. Joe's. How about a welcome for Christian Value from Canisius? Not a big test. Maritime, God bless them for coming out there in their first year, but right up against one of the top teams in not just Western New York, but in New York State. That was a tough matchup for them. And I know Value only played into the third quarter there, but I don't want to say impressive win. It was a nice win for them to start the season, but a lot of good players came out of that game.
Right, but Joe Jamison on both sides of the ball dominated like he did as a junior. When you have Joe and you have Joel Nicholas, they're 2 of the speedsters. And if you take Ben Schoenling in the line that they have, they're going to be a force. But I think the biggest difference between Canisius last year and this year is just basically if you play a team such as West New York Maritime and it's expected you're going to win and you win, how much you really get out of playing that game when you had all your starters for the most part sitting. So they play Aquinas in a couple of weeks, so that'll be a game that will be barometer as far as how they really are.
Absolutely. I got to give a shout out to Hugh Wolf, my little cousin. Got into the game with maybe about 5 or 6 minutes left, and he made a tackle. So no Wolf has ever made a tackle in a Monsignor Martin game before. So my cousin Hugh Wolf, congratulations to him. Very proud of you. So that's all I have. I'm going to leave it at that before I get in too much trouble here.
I made more than one. I made one tackle that I went 89 yards, tackled out the fullback, who was Bazooga, and I knocked him out at the 1 yard line, and he fumbled. And then the next thing that I remembered was in the hospital the next day at 8 o'clock when I woke up, and my first question was to the doctor, and I said, "Hey, did he score?" The doctor looked at me and says, "Where are you coming from?" He says, "You got a major concussion." And I said, "Well, I just want to know if the guy scored because I got a concussion." So if you get 1, or if you get 50, or if you get 100, you're going to have a memory.
Make it count. My goodness. Let's talk about some of the players from this past week that really caught your eye. Started with that St. Francis. Was it the quarterback who set a record?
Jake Ritz, only a sophomore, and I've been hearing about him all summer as far as how good he is. And he came out with 485 yards, 4 touchdowns, broke several schools' records, and they lost against McDowell. McDowell's got a powerful team, and it'll be interesting because I think St. Joe's plays McDowell this week, so we'll see how they fare. But if you look at Cole Snyder, 222 yards, 5 touchdowns, he was the force. Aaron Chase just lit it up. 419 yards, 4 touchdowns, and with Ben Gruel and I'm sorry, but it's Gruel and I'm blocking on the other wide receiver from Star Point,
Bowden, the 6'3" kid.
6'3" kid that Boston College is looking at. But he has such tremendous vertical leap that they're going to be a force in those games with Star Point and South Park and Vicinity games to see.
We didn't even talk about South Park, and we're probably going to get beat up for that, but that's okay. They have a heck of a team this year. South Park does. They did a number on Niagara Falls.
They got most of the kids back. Yep. Niagara Falls has a very, very young team, so they might struggle this year, but Don will have them competitive.
The running back from Orchard Park, Louis Azari, went for 149. John Spire from West Seneca West, $146. Chautauqua Lake had two running backs that each ran for over 100 yards, and Trey Sauerland and Ryan Jafarigan. Quantavius Cleckley from Dunkirk, who we talked about earlier, 183 yards, 3 touchdowns. How about that kid from Lackawanna, the quarterback we talked about briefly? Set 3 school records, passing attempts 21, yards in a game 372, and then touchdowns. He had 4 touchdowns. That's one heck of a debut. His first game as a starter, and he's a senior. Did we see this coming?
I didn't see it coming because, one, he's a senior. I've never seen him play. But then you take a look at a lot of the kids that are coming back. The coaching had him tarred up in the staff. They do a good job. But if you look at Lackawanna, when they went to 3-4 state championships in a row, they played Smash Mouth football.
Yeah.
And they're playing Smash Mouth football this year. So, as we mentioned before, it'll be interesting to see how they do with Albion, who I think is really a playoff contender.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I will not be inviting Coach Tardif to any card games, because he kept that kid quiet. He kept quiet on that kid for quite a while. So, Coach Tardif, you are not allowed to any card games that I'm holding ever.
Hey, it's you need to be humble in victory and respectful in defeat. And one time I had a coach, and he gave me the 40 time. George Witcher from Salamanca of his team, four kids, and he's got 4'8", 4'9", 4'8". Well, those kids were all 4'6". And I said to him, "Why did you put them down?" He said, "You think I'm going to give the opposition knowledge as far as how fast these kids were?" And I'm looking. This is like 20 years ago, and I'm looking at him saying, "Hey, that's why you win a lot of games."
You mentioned Cole Snyder. Obviously had a great game. We've been talking about Chase since we started the program. He had a heck of a game. Newsall, Cavanis, Isaiah Rim from Medina. They were trailing in the fourth quarter. That veteran leadership and that experience from Ream helped turn that game around for Medina. So I believe he had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to help complete that comeback. Keyshawn Beal had a very good game for Cheektowaga. No question that he'll be on the radar for Connolly Cup once again. The kid from Maryville, Rashad Law, both sides of the ball. Fantastic game for Rashad Law. Ritza, you had mentioned. Jaden Robinson from Hutch Tech had a pretty good game for himself. Jack Sharp didn't look too shabby, OP. I mentioned Jordan Parks earlier from Niagara Wheatfield. Kudos, though, to Justin Hanf, the head coach of Maple Grove, and, of course, Craig Dana getting their first wins as head coaches.
There's only 2 coaches.
Yeah, the only 2 that won,
That won their first game.
Tough luck for Jeremy Zimmer and Eric Jancy, who he had not a warm welcome. Niagara Wheatfield, the way they trounced the Lumberjacks. I know he's going to get those kids back to work. They're a much better team than what we saw first game of the year. They've got a long way to go, but they're going to be much more competitive in the weeks ahead.
Different offensive schemes, different defensive schemes. The coaching staff that he has, they led him to about 8 league titles, several sectional titles, state championship. They'll be back. They'll be back this year, next year.
Yeah, and they got a matchup with Sweet Home this week, so they got 2 0-1 teams. Someone's got to win that game, so we'll see what happens there. I like Sweet Home. I really like the play of that quarterback. I know he did. I didn't see him late in the fourth quarter, so I don't know if he left the game or what, but we'll have to see there. Any other players stand out? Mika Brown, St. Joe's, you mentioned, had a pretty good game for himself. Zaire Leonard from Williamsville North, a true freshman.
There.
Zaire Leonard, yes. He has a great modified history. He did really good in the modifieds. He had something like 54 touchdowns in a year or two playing on the modifieds. But this year, he was in a defensive back role. Did very well against that Williamsville East offense. He came up with a big interception in that game, and he ran the ball. He had a couple of carries that I noticed did pretty well. He's going to be a player.
Yeah, I had him as freshman of the week, and he's just got a wonderful future.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Zach Norton, Clarence. We talk about John Stevens, we talk about Jack Putney a lot, but this kid had a heck of a game for Clarence.
He's only a sophomore, 125 yards. I think he had a couple of touchdowns. And Putney played an outstanding game. Stevens also had 3 touchdowns. So Clarence dominated Ken West, particularly in the second half. We'll see what they do against Williamsville North.
You mentioned in your news and notes report on WGRZ a kid named Finn O'Brien from East Aurora.
Right.
17 tackles in the game against Pioneer. I know they lost, but that's a nice beginning for that kid. They got their hands on a player there.
He's 6'1". He's a transfer from California. He's a senior, and he is a stud. And when you take the name Finn O'Brien, it's like, well, that's a good Irishman. Just like Slade, Stone, Murphy, the lineman for Clarence. So we got a few of the Irish that are good this year.
Yes, and the Irish, of course, winning Saturday against Michigan, but that's for another show. All right, we're going to come back in segment number 3 and talk a little bit about the matchups coming up this weekend. Welcome back to WNYA Athletics High School Football Weekly with Frank Wolf and Dick Gallagher from WGRZ High School Sports, wrapping up the segment today with upcoming games. So, Dick, there's a bunch of games. I mean, really, obviously, Week 1 had some surprises. Not a lot of great games, a lot of blowouts. Week 2, I don't think you're going to see a lot of blowouts. You've got Thursday night, Lockport and Bennett, Newfane and Burgard. Those are 2 okay games. If I had to go to either one of them, I'd probably go to that Lockport-Bennett game. But Friday night, you got Lancaster at Hutch Tech. And I think that game's going to be a little closer than people expect. I think that game's going to be a touchdown or 2 either way. You got Niagara Falls and Orchard Park. They always have close games. North at Clarence. That's got to be the game of the week for AA, you would think. And then, Hamburg at Jamestown, no Van Sickle, we don't think. Ken West at West Seneca West. We touched on that a little bit. Kenmore East at Williamsville East could be a closer game than people think.
Kenmore East at least had, again, I think they only have 22 kids.
Yeah, lost by 11, East, I think.
Their offense was, okay against Amherst.
Yeah.
And when you look at, they've only won a couple of games in the last few years, so you got to give credit to those kids that are coming out of Tiffany Murdy, the
absolutely. Amherst at Star Point. I know Amherst had a pretty good game. They beat Kenmore